This week on the video version of The Business of Tech, do Americans really hate their jobs? Microsoft accused of bribery in new whistleblower essay, Office real estate warning signs, Treasury looks into cyber insurance, and the Q1 2022 IT Leadership Diversity Report. All this and more, hit those like and subscribe buttons, and here are this week's stories. With the new week comes some new data about working. Employers are changing the way they approach background checks. Per reporting in Axios, some are switching to one-year reviews of backgrounds rather than a 7-year look to widen the pools of applicants. And there's a new option, continuous monitoring, where they are checking court records regularly. There's been a 12% increase in this approach over the past year per Appriss Insights. There is a flaw here too. Black Americans tend to be more harshly treated by police and the courts, so if employers are getting flagged when someone is arrested or charged, it could have a disproportionate effect on them. In a survey of HR leaders, there are several possible pitfalls ahead for companies who aren't adapting to the new reality. 41% cited the persistence of meeting culture as a top challenge, noting meetings were too long, poorly timed, and lacking focus, which was squashing productivity as a result. 2/3 at 67% of survey respondents strongly agreed that allowing employees to choose which meetings they attended would improve productivity. There's an IT reliance here too. More than 8 in 10 respondents at 84% said they were receiving more emails than ever, and there was a similar response when respondents were asked about their use of instant messaging at 80%, video communications 83%, and file sharing tools 77%. The report highlights the need to keep these technologies under control, culturally, not technologically. I also wanted to pull a couple of data points from a long piece in The Atlantic that dispels the myth that most Americans hate their job. It has 3 narratives. First, Americans don't want to work anymore. Second, most Americans hate their job, and the pandemic made them really hate their job. And third, that the Great Resignation is a reflection of that job hatred. In the first, the author notes 4% unemployment and more than 80% of prime-age workers employed or looking for work. On the second, the Conference Board reported that job satisfaction in the first year of the pandemic was the highest the organization had recorded since 1995. And the third points to research by Angus Reid Global, which points to worker opportunity as the real reason, not worker sentiment. The short conclusion is that people are quitting because they see more job listings and switch to better jobs. So why do we care? This is also very intertwined. Let's start with the Atlantic piece, as it clearly says what's going on here. The job market is tight because there are many opportunities. The disruption to the old ways has proven to be welcome, i.e., higher job satisfaction. This leads to the conclusions to be made from the other 2 stories. Successful employers will be the ones who examine their own cultures and organizations to ensure that satisfaction stays high, because workers have so much more opportunity. Reevaluating the hiring criteria seems wise. I'm less sold on continuous monitoring, particularly for SMB organizations, and with the implications of race being problematic, but I am sold on changing gating criteria. One story I didn't want to let slip by, The Verge covering a story about accusations from within Microsoft of ignoring bribery by employees, subcontractors, and government operators in foreign transactions. In an essay on whistleblower platform Lioness, Yasser Elbud described his experiences. He estimated that more than $200 million each year is spent on bribes and kickbacks linked to the company, often in countries like Ghana, Nigeria, Zimbabwe, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. He believes more than half of the salespeople and managers took part in the regions he worked in. It's going on at all levels, he said in an interview with The Verge. All the executives are aware of it, and they're promoting the bad people. If you're doing the right thing, they won't promote you. In a statement to Insider, Microsoft said, We believe we previously investigated these allegations, which are many years old, and addressed them. We cooperated with government agencies to resolve any concerns. Why do we care? The lesson here is embedded in the Verge article. Quote, "But while a good process can excuse a few bad cases, evidence of a bad process can bring more severe punishment, a particularly serious threat given the Justice Department's recent focus on repeat corporate offenders." So is this bad for Microsoft? Oh, sure. What I'm more interested to learn, however, is if this is a process failure or not. The investigation, if any, will be critical. Think about how your organization would respond. Look the other way, have a way to address it, or potentially, worst of all, not know what to do. New data from the real estate market shows the vacancy rates have changed. They continue to go up across major markets. Digging into it, Barclays analysts noted last week that the share of office mortgages that have been assigned to either watch lists of loans showing signs of being in trouble or special servicing where loans with missed payments are sent has hit more than 21%. That's the highest since the financial crisis. GeekWire, which covers much Seattle-based news, dug into the changes in population in King County, Washington, which contains Seattle and Bellevue, big tech hubs. It's down 20,000 people between July 2020 and July 2021. The Next Web did their analysis in the UK. Yes, resignations did rise sharply from the end of 2020 and into 2021. Why? Similar to data reported yesterday, for new jobs. Oh, and better paying ones. Couple that with new data in a change not just where we work, but also when. Axios reports on research showing roughly half of people are night owls, dictated by genetics, not choice. The coverage cites examples of leaders and creatives whose peak times are later. Why do we care? So, which matters more? Executives proclaiming the return to the office, or occupancy data and office mortgages being deemed problematic? I'll go with the mortgage data. This is also a slow-moving insight, as leases are long-term commitments. Today's takeaway: there is opportunity in flexibility. Future-forward organizations find ways to be flexible to employees' wants to meet the market where it is. Now, to follow up on the Okta breach again. First, the company has apologized for not telling customers sooner about their breach. Quote, "We want to acknowledge that we made a mistake. Sitel is our service provider for which we are ultimately responsible. In January, we did not know the extent of the Sitel issue, only that we had detected and prevented an account takeover attempt and that Sitel had retained a third-party forensic firm to investigate. At that time, we didn't recognize that there was a risk to Okta and our customers. We should have more actively and forcefully compelled information from Sitel." The disclosures to customers happened after Lapsus bragged about the breach. The company maintains that only 366 customers are impacted. A leaked post-mortem report from Mandiant tells more detail about the security lapses. Top among those is a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet named domadmins-lastpass.xlsx, which the Lapsus attacker found on a computer system at Sitel-owned Sykes Enterprises, which provides outsourced customer support for Okta. The file name indicates that credentials stored in LastPass may have been exported to an Excel spreadsheet. It also reveals the Lapsus hackers had, quote, "little regard for OPSEC," end quote, used the credentials to create backdoor users, used off-the-shelf tools from open-source code repository GitHub for most of their attacks, and set up email forwarding for all messages within Sitel to accounts controlled by the attacker. The group had access over a 5-day window from January 16th to 21st. Why do we care? Because leaving the domain admin passwords in an exported Excel file seems bad. On the flip side, the hackers were not necessarily as sophisticated as previously thought. Scary when the company in question is the security gatekeeper for other companies. And that's my takeaway. If you're making claims about being a security company, you sure had better back that up with operational excellence. It's one thing to be an end customer who gets breached. There are very different sets of expectations the moment you claim to be in the security business. And there are a lot of companies in technology now claiming to be security ones. Be very sure before you make that claim, and be sure you can maintain it. Let's check in on the Games Developer Conference that just concluded in San Francisco as a gauge for in-person events. Organizers announced a 2022 attendance figure of 17,000, down 41% from the record 29,000 attendees at GDC 2019. However, 5,000 of those attendees were signed on for the virtual component of the show, so the actual convention center crowd was closer to 12,000, or down 59% compared to 2019. For color and insight into the ground feel, the Washington Post gave some insight, highlighting both the promoted rules and the inconsistency on site. Now, why do we care? It's that down 59% I was most interested in. Large-scale events are changing, and tracking this set of numbers is where I'm curious. Events aren't gone forever, nor would they be 100% instantly returned. So the question is, what percentage are they returning to, and where will they land ongoing? I consider this data something of a proxy for other changes post-pandemic, and a simple one to track, which is why I care about it. Off about 60% is pretty striking. The Treasury Department is asking questions about how to boost the insurance industry around cyber terrorism, specifically focused on potential changes to programs established in the wake of 9/11. The focus is, quote, gathering additional data about coverages and losses, including to ransomware, which would help assess the adequacy. The comment period seeks feedback within 45 days. Quoting from NextGov, a comprehensive review of the Treasury program is expected this spring, a Government Accountability Office official told NextGov. Treasury is navigating a narrow course between trying to work with insurers to gather data on ransomware payments and warning insurance companies and other financial third parties that they run the risk of violating sanctions by making such payments, due to the probability of attacks being sponsored by adversarial regimes such as Russia. End quote. Treasury noted that, quote, one of the most important mitigation criteria is whether the victim company has engaged federal law enforcement prior to paying the ransom. Why do we care? This is a small but significant story. I've covered changes and concerns in the insurance industry related to cyber coverage multiple times now. The problem is large enough that regulators are looking into it. That's not a bad thing. The attacks are crimes. Why wouldn't law enforcement be involved? And to be involved, of course, regulators need to be investigating. Here's your comment period, and in particular, those consuming or advocating for their customers should be paying attention here. Are you still using on-prem file servers and VPNs to share files with remote workers? Egnyte is a business-class cloud sharing solution that works more like your on-prem server than other solutions. With a security-first approach to file sharing and collaboration, Egnyte offers multiple options for sharing files and collecting files from outside sources, and do it all addressing data governance and compliance. Want to learn more? Check out egnyte.com/MSPradio, and when you do, tell them Dave sent you. Tech Aisle with some PC Market data showing SMBs worldwide are likely to purchase 104.5 million PCs in 2022, a growth of 3.4% from 2021. The North American and Western European SMB PC shipment growth rates will likely be below 3%. Why do we care? I've linked to the research, and the very smart Anurag Agarwal notes, quote, there may not be a similar heady double-digit PC growth rate in 2022, but indications are that the SMB PC market will continue to grow. He's not wrong. 3.4% is growth. It's just not significant. I have a longer piece coming out this Friday discussing the market size, so this data point seemed important. It's not enough growth to drive growth in services, while still being revenue to leverage as a foundational opportunity. NPR dove into the proliferation of deep fakes generated faces used as LinkedIn profiles. Their investigation, quote, found that many of the LinkedIn profiles seem to have a far more mundane purpose, drumming up sales for companies big and small. Accounts send messages to potential customers. Anyone who takes the bait gets connected to a real salesperson who tries to close the deal. Think telemarketing for the digital age. By using fake profiles, companies can cast a wide net online without beefing up their own sales staff or hitting LinkedIn's limits on messages. Demand for online sales leads exploded during the pandemic as it became hard for sales teams to pitch their products in person. More than 70 businesses were listed as employers on these fake profiles. Several told NPR that they had hired outside marketers to help with sales. They said they hadn't authorized any use of computer-generated images, however, and many were surprised to learn about them when NPR asked. Why do we care? Earlier this year, the IT services space had some controversy when a firm created a fake LinkedIn profile on behalf of ConnectWise, which happened to have the same name as a well-known community member. I bring that up because ConnectWise was surprised by the practice too. They clearly aren't alone. This speaks to outsourcing in general. First, as a consumer of outsourced services, a company will need insight into what they paid for. In the end, if your name goes on it, it's related to you. One isn't absolved from responsibility by outsourcing. Second, as producers of outsourced services, make sure you're giving enough visibility to your customers on what you do in their name. It's likely less of a problem for IT services, although still something to remember as you sell and deliver your own value. Each quarter, this podcast researches the leadership of companies involved in the delivery of IT services and classifies the racial diversity of those teams. Monitoring 301 companies, this quarter's report tracks 3,244 humans. Identified on the website of each organization, they are then classified as white and then non-white, as well as specifically black. Additionally, they are classified as male or female. For Q1 2022, 87.73% of those tracked are white, up from 86.18% last quarter. 79.75% male, down from 80.32% last quarter. Publicly traded companies are more diverse and more female than the total population measured. Fortune 1000 companies are as well. Technology providers as a whole are roughly on par with the total population measured, as are views of the vendors. The smaller group of those who self-report are significantly more diverse than the overall cohort. For the first time, we're also publishing trends data. These are graphs of the data over time. It's available as a download at businessof.tech. These paint a different picture. Overall, the leadership teams are getting more white, not less. In the first data set in September 2020, leadership teams were 82.31% white. Now that number has increased to 87.73%. That's been pulled from the overall non-white number, as black generally hovered just below 2%. When viewing on gender, the leadership teams remain roughly 80% male and 20% female, showing a very gently sloped increase in female leadership. Why do we care? On race, this isn't getting better. That's why. Lots of talk, little change, at least not at the top. I wanted to observe how the factor that does appear to be making a difference is size, both in Fortune 1000 companies and those that achieve the scale to be publicly traded. These manage to be somewhat more diverse, although the trend line is in the wrong direction. On gender, there does appear to be general positive movement. It's a slow progression up, although remains around 20%. Observe that in the industry, there have been women in technology discussions for years, and roughly 1% increase per year on these metrics. Do we really want to be another 30 years before it's equal? I maintain that the reason to care about this data is that in order to sell to the most customers, you have to understand them and have perspectives from all. Leaders reflect their organizations, so if you want a diverse organization, it should be led by a diverse leadership team. The end result would be better understanding, better products and services, better sales, and better organizations. And we're not the only ones looking at this. Quoting liberally from Axios, the Federal Reserve made a commitment to an inclusive recovery, announcing a mandate to achieve maximum employment should be broad-based and inclusive, meaning it would let the economy run hotter to pull more people into the job market. It also aimed to pay attention to employment stats for different segments of the population instead of just overall numbers. In context, higher interest rates typically slow the economy, leading to higher unemployment rates. And while the overall jobless rate is now low by historical standards, the black unemployment rate is double that of whites, and the Hispanic rate exceeds whites by more than a point. A recent paper that Axios' Neil Irwin wrote about shows that even in a tight labor market, a cut in the Fed's target interest rate was followed by black employment growth of about 0.91 percentage points. The critical jobs number report comes out Friday. Why do we care? I wanted to highlight another effort that is tracking the changes when intentional choices are made. By adding the dimension of tracking the impact of financial decisions on different racial groups, the Fed is able to make more informed decisions. You can't manage what you don't measure, right? Thanks for tuning in to This Week in the Business of Tech. Shows come out each week, pulling together the daily podcast. If you like this show, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. The content here is possible because of supporters like you. If you want access to shows early, answers to your questions, and private interactions, join our Patreon. It's pay what you want. You decide what the content is worth. Join at patreon.com/MSPradio. Patreons also get access to the written versions of every story as they come out. If you want the stories right away, you can get them on the daily podcast. Find The Business of Tech on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your shows. Subscribe links at businessof.tech, and I'll talk to you again next week.